My name is Olivia. I'm 34 years old, and I teach high school English in suburban Ohio. If you knew me, you'd probably describe me as the reliable one. The sister who never caused drama, the wife who always did the right thing. The daughter who kept everyone together. I've been the responsible one my entire life. When my dad walked out on us when I was 16, I was the one who got a part-time job to help mom pay the bills. While Harper, my younger sister, was out partying and dating every guy in town, I was at home making sure the lights stayed on and there was food in the fridge. I carried that same sense of responsibility into my marriage. When I met Taylor in college, he was everything I thought I wanted. He was pre-law, serious about his future, driven in ways that impressed me. While other girls were dating the charming troublemakers, I chose the guy who talked about building something real together. I supported him through 3 grueling years of law school. I worked double shifts waitressing to help pay his tuition while he studied. I believed we were building our future together, brick by brick. When he'd get stressed about exams or worried about his career, I was the one who held him together and reminded him why we were sacrificing so much. I believed in loyalty. I believed in doing the right thing. I genuinely thought that if you were a good person, if you worked hard and loved deeply, good things would eventually come your way. That belief shaped every decision I made for 20 years. When Taylor proposed after graduation, I thought my faith in doing things right had paid off. He said I was his anchor, the reason he wanted to build something meaningful. We got married when I was 26 and he was 28. Those early years felt like everything I dreamed of. The first few years were absolutely blissful. We bought our first house, a modest 2-bedroom, in a quiet neighborhood that needed work but had good bones. We spent every weekend painting rooms and fixing things together. Taylor would joke that we were practicing for when we'd have kids helping us hold the ladder. We'd lie in bed at night talking about baby names, debating whether our children would have his dark eyes or my green ones. We planned which room would be the nursery, what kind of playground we'd build in the backyard. Everything felt perfect and intentional. But the one thing we both wanted most seemed impossible to achieve. We'd been trying for a baby for 3 years. 3 long, heartbreaking years of negative pregnancy tests, doctor appointments, and fertility consultations that drained our savings and our hope. Every month, I'd take another test, already knowing what it would say. Every month, Taylor would hold my hand through another disappointment and promise me we'd figure it out together. He'd stroke my hair while I cried and tell me that maybe next month would be different. Those moments felt so real, so genuine. He seemed as heartbroken as I was every time we got bad news. He'd research new treatments, suggest different doctors, hold me when the hormones from fertility medications made me an emotional wreck. I trusted him completely, because I thought we were facing this challenge together as a team. My sister Harper was always the complete opposite of me. 3 years younger and effortlessly beautiful, she could charm her way out of any situation. While I was building a stable life, Harper was dating half the guys in town, never keeping anyone longer than a few months. I thought I was being a good sister by helping her. I'd make extra food when she came over, lend her money when she was short on bills, let her use our guest room when she needed a break from her chaotic life. Taylor seemed to enjoy having her around too. He'd laugh at her stories about difficult customers at the restaurant, offer advice about her relationship problems, even help her move apartments when her latest romance fell apart. I thought we were just being good family to her. When we were kids, Harper would break Mom's favorite vase and somehow convince our parents it was an accident that deserved ice cream, not punishment. In high school, she'd skip classes and still manage to sweet-talk teachers into giving her extensions on every assignment. While I was student body treasurer and editor of the school newspaper, Harper was the girl everyone wanted to be friends with. She had this magnetic personality that drew people in, made them want to be around her even when she was clearly bad news. She dated what felt like half the guys in our town, never keeping anyone around longer than a few months. Harper would get bored easily, always looking for the next exciting thing, the next person who could entertain her. She'd have these passionate, dramatic relationships that would burn bright for a few weeks and then explode spectacularly. I'd watch her cycle through boyfriends like they were disposable, never understanding how she could just walk away from people who claimed to love her. But Harper never seemed to get hurt by these breakups. If anything, she seemed energized by the drama, like the chaos fed some part of her personality that craved constant stimulation. After high school, while I was in college building something stable, Harper drifted between jobs. She was a bartender at an upscale restaurant downtown, work that suited her personality perfectly. She was charming with customers, made decent tips, and had a schedule that left her free to go out most nights. Harper was great at her job because she genuinely enjoyed talking to strangers, flirting just enough to increase her tips without crossing lines, making everyone feel like they were the most interesting person she'd met all day. Customers would ask for her specifically, and she'd remember their favorite drinks and personal details that made them feel special. But Harper was always complaining about being broke. She'd call me crying about her rent being due or her car breaking down, but she never seemed interested in getting serious about a real career. She liked the flexibility of bartending, the social aspect, the fact that she could take time off whenever she wanted to travel or chase some new guy. She'd spend her tip money on expensive clothes and makeup, go out drinking with coworkers most nights, sleep until noon, and then act surprised when she couldn't afford basic expenses. I'd lecture her about budgeting and responsibility, but Harper would just laugh and say she was young and supposed to be having fun. When Dad left, I'd stepped into a caretaker role with Harper that continued well into our adult lives. I felt responsible for her poor decisions, guilty when she struggled, obligated to help her even when her problems were entirely self-created. Everything changed when Tay Taylor became a partner at his firm 2 years ago. Suddenly, we had real money, a nicer house, the kind of stability that I'd worked toward my entire adult life. We traded our starter home for a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a better neighborhood, with a 2-car garage and a backyard perfect for children. That's when Harper started hanging around more. She'd show up for dinner uninvited, always with some story about being in the neighborhood or wanting to spend time with family. She'd call at the last minute asking if she could crash on our couch because she was having problems with her roommate, or her apartment was too hot, or she just didn't want to be alone. Harper always needed something: money to cover her electric bill because tips had been slow, a place to stay while she figured out her living situation, someone to listen to her latest relationship drama, which usually involved some guy who'd turned out to be married or unavailable or just not as interested as she'd hoped. She'd sit at our kitchen table, eating food I'd prepared, drinking wine Taylor had paid for, complaining about how unfair her life was, while surrounded by everything I'd worked years to achieve. But I thought that was just Harper being Harper. A little self-centered, but ultimately harmless. I thought I was being a good sister by helping her. After all, family was supposed to support each other, right? When Dad left, Harper and I only had each other and Mom. I felt responsible for taking care of the people I loved, and that included my little sister, even when she made questionable choices. Taylor was always gracious about Harper's unexpected visits. He'd set an extra plate at dinner, offer her a drink, and listen politely to whatever drama she was dealing with that week. I thought he was just being a good brother-in-law, supporting the family connections that mattered to me. He'd even give Harper advice sometimes, suggesting she look into bartending at higher-end establishments where the tips would be better, or offering to help her create a resume if she wanted to try a different career path. I was proud of how patient and supportive he was with my chaotic sister. I had no idea I was inviting a predator into my home. 3 weeks before my birthday, I was doing laundry on a quiet Sunday morning. Taylor was at the gym, and I was going through his work clothes from the week before. That's when I found it tucked deep in his suit jacket pocket. A receipt from Romano's for dinner for two. The date on the receipt made my blood run cold. It was from the exact night he'd told me he was working late on a major case. The night he'd come home at midnight, claiming he'd grabbed a quick sandwich at his desk. The same night Harper had called in sick to work with what she said was food poisoning. I sat on our bedroom floor, holding that piece of paper with shaking hands, and everything clicked into place like puzzle pieces I'd been refusing to see. Every late night, every secretive phone call, every excuse suddenly made perfect sense. I remembered how Harper would show up at our house within minutes of Taylor getting home, like she was checking to make sure he'd followed through on some plan they'd made. How she'd ask casual questions about his schedule, about when I'd be working late or out with friends. The expensive clothes, the new hairstyle, the mysterious man she wouldn't tell me about. It wasn't some wealthy customer from the restaurant. It was my husband. My husband had been buying my sister gifts while telling me we couldn't afford fertility treatments. I could have confronted them right then. I could have called them both, screamed, thrown things, demanded answers. The old Olivia probably would have. But something had changed in me during those months of watching and wondering. I'd become someone who planned instead of reacting. So I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. I started documenting everything. I took a picture of that receipt and every other piece of evidence I could find. I started recording dates and times, tracking Taylor's schedule against Harper's work shifts. I went through our credit card statements and found charges I'd never noticed before. Expensive dinners, hotel rooms, jewelry purchases that had never made it home to me. I screenshotted everything before Taylor could see that I'd been looking. I started really paying attention to their patterns. How Taylor's late nights always coincided with Harper's shifts. How she'd text me asking about our weekend plans, then suddenly be unavailable when I suggested we spend time together. How they both seemed to know things about each other's schedules that they'd never mentioned to me. The most heartbreaking part was realizing how long this had been going on. Looking back through months of bank statements, I could trace their relationship developing while I sat at home taking pregnancy tests and crying over negative results. I opened my own bank account at a different bank and started quietly moving money. Not everything, just enough to protect myself if this all fell apart. I told myself it was just a precaution, that maybe I was wrong, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. I called my friend Lisa, who's a divorce attorney, and asked what I thought were hypothetical questions about infidelity and asset protection. How evidence worked in divorce proceedings, what rights I'd have to the house, how custody worked when there were children involved. Lisa must have sensed something in my voice, because she kept asking if I was okay, if there was something specific I needed to talk about. I told her I was just curious about a case I'd heard about, but she didn't seem convinced. I wasn't ready to blow up my life yet. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that there was some explanation for everything I'd discovered. But I was preparing for the possibility that the man I'd loved for 8 years and the sister I'd protected my whole life had been betraying me together. The hardest part was acting normal around them both. Smiling when Taylor kissed me goodbye, laughing at Harper's stories about difficult customers, pretending I didn't know they were living a lie right in front of me. If you think this story is getting intense, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what I discovered next made this receipt look like nothing. Have you ever found evidence that someone you trusted was lying to you? Tell me in the comments how you handled it, because I'm about to show you exactly what 3 weeks of planning can accomplish. The week before my birthday, Taylor surprised me by suggesting we have a family dinner to celebrate. He said he wanted to keep it intimate, just close family, my mom, Harper, maybe my Aunt Ruth, if she was available. This was completely out of character for him since he'd never shown much interest in planning celebrations before. Usually, I was the one who organized family gatherings while he showed up and enjoyed the results. He was incredibly sweet about the whole thing, offering to help me plan the menu and even suggesting we get fresh flowers for the dining room table. He spent an entire evening researching recipes online, something I'd never seen him do in 8 years of marriage. When I suggested making my usual roast chicken, he countered with ideas for more elaborate dishes that would impress our guests. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd been completely paranoid. Maybe I'd been looking for problems that weren't actually there, creating suspicion where none should exist. Here was my husband, planning a thoughtful birthday celebration, being more attentive than he'd been in months. Maybe those receipts had innocent explanations. Maybe Harper really had been sick that night, and Taylor really had worked late and grabbed dinner alone. Maybe I'd let my imagination run wild during what was admittedly a stressful time in our marriage. The fertility struggles had put pressure on both of us, and perhaps I'd been projecting my own insecurities onto perfectly normal interactions between my husband and my sister. Harper was equally enthusiastic about the dinner, which should have made me happy, but instead felt unsettling. She offered to bring dessert from this expensive bakery downtown. Something she'd never done before since she was always complaining about being broke and asking me to cover her portion when we went out to eat. She called me twice that week, just to discuss dessert options, asking detailed questions about what flavors I preferred and whether I wanted something elegant or more casual. This level of attention to my preferences was unprecedented from Harper, who usually showed up to family events with whatever was convenient or forgot to bring anything at all. Taylor said he'd handle selecting the wine, which was sweet since he knew I didn't know much about pairing wines with food, but he spent an unusual amount of time researching wine selections, asking me multiple questions about what we were serving, and even calling the liquor store to get recommendations from their sommelier. They were both being so helpful, so attentive to every detail of the evening. Harper kept texting me suggestions about decorations and asking if I needed help with anything. She offered to come over early to help me set up, something she'd never volunteered to do before. Usually, Harper arrived fashionably late to family events and left early to meet friends or go to work. Taylor brought home fresh flowers 3 days early and spent an entire evening rearranging furniture to make the dining room feel more spacious and elegant. He moved our heavy dining table to create better flow and even polished the good silverware we only used for special occasions. I actually started to feel guilty for doubting them. Here they were. The two people I loved most, working together to make my birthday special. And I'd been secretly photographing receipts and moving money like they were my enemies. Maybe the stress of trying to get pregnant for so long had made me paranoid and suspicious of innocent interactions. But the morning of my birthday, I woke up with this strange feeling in my stomach. Not excitement or anticipation like you'd expect on your birthday, but genuine dread that sat like a heavy weight in my chest. Something felt wrong, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. The feeling was so strong that I actually considered canceling the dinner altogether. Taylor was already up when I opened my eyes, which was unusual since he typically slept until the last possible minute before work, often hitting snooze multiple times. He was downstairs making coffee, humming to himself, being unusually cheerful for a Monday morning. The humming was what struck me most. Taylor wasn't a humming person, especially not first thing in the morning. When I came down to the kitchen, he kissed my forehead and wished me happy birthday with this bright smile that seemed forced somehow. His energy felt manic, like he was overcompensating for something. He'd already laid out my favorite mug and had started making my coffee exactly the way I liked it, which was thoughtful but felt performative. Throughout the morning, he kept checking his phone and smiling in a way that made my stomach turn. Not the comfortable happy smile he usually had when reading funny emails from his law school friends, but something secretive and anticipatory. He'd read a message, get this little smirk, then quickly put his phone face down when he noticed me watching. When I asked if everything was okay at work, he said everything was perfect. Better than perfect, actually. He seemed excited about something I wasn't supposed to know about, like a child who knows about a surprise party but can't quite contain their anticipation. Harper started texting me before 9 in the morning, which was bizarre since she never woke up before noon on her days off. Her first text was just, "Happy birthday, sis," followed immediately by, "So excited for tonight." The enthusiasm felt forced and over the top, even for Harper, who could be dramatic. She sent me 3 separate messages before noon asking what time dinner was supposed to start, what I was planning to wear, whether I was excited about the celebration. Her texts felt oddly urgent, like she was anxious about getting specific details confirmed rather than just making casual conversation. When I told her dinner would start at 6, she immediately asked if that was firm or if there was any flexibility. When I mentioned I was thinking of wearing my blue dress, she responded with multiple heart emojis and said I'd look absolutely perfect. The responses felt scripted, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear, rather than having genuine reactions. The whole thing felt choreographed, like they were both following some script I hadn't been given. Their coordination was too perfect, their enthusiasm too intense for a simple family birthday dinner. I'd had 33 previous birthdays, and neither of them had ever been this invested in the planning details or this excited about a family gathering. I spent the entire day preparing for the dinner, but I wasn't just preparing the food and setting the table. I was preparing myself mentally for whatever was about to happen. My instincts were screaming that tonight wasn't really about celebrating my birthday at all, that I was being set up for something I couldn't yet see coming. I chose my outfit carefully. The blue dress Taylor had bought me for our anniversary 2 years ago. It was still my favorite, the one that made me feel confident and beautiful, that brought out the color in my eyes and fit me perfectly. I did my hair and makeup more carefully than I had in months, taking extra time to make everything perfect. I had this overwhelming feeling that this might be the last time I'd get dressed up as Taylor's wife. That whatever was about to happen tonight would change everything between us forever. So I wanted to look like the woman he'd fallen in love with, the woman he'd promised to build a life with, one final time. Around 4 in the afternoon, I called my mom to confirm what time she should arrive. During our conversation, I casually mentioned that there might be some interesting news shared during dinner tonight. I didn't specify what kind of interesting, just planted the seed that something significant might happen and that she should pay attention. I was setting the table that evening. Taylor kept disappearing outside to take phone calls. Every few minutes, his phone would buzz and he'd excuse himself, stepping out onto the back patio with this strange urgency I'd never seen before. When I asked about it, he said work was crazy, that some big case was developing and he needed to stay on top of things. But something was off. He was smiling too much when he came back inside, almost giddy. Happy in a way that didn't match his explanation about work stress. I'd been married to this man for 8 years. I knew his work face, his stressed face, his genuinely excited face. This wasn't any of those. This was something else entirely. He looked like someone who was barely containing excitement about a secret, like a kid on Christmas morning who knows exactly what's under the tree. That's when I knew tonight wasn't really about celebrating my birthday. Tonight was about something else entirely. Something I wasn't supposed to know about, until they were ready to tell me. Dinner started normally enough. Mom complimented the roast, saying it was perfectly seasoned and cooked just right. Harper raved about the wine Taylor had picked out, going on about how it paired beautifully with the meal, and how sophisticated his taste had become. Everyone wished me happy birthday, passing around cards and small gifts. But there was electricity in the air, this tension that felt like everyone was waiting for something to happen. It reminded me of those moments right before a thunderstorm, when the air gets thick and charged, and you know something big is coming. Taylor and Harper kept exchanging glances across the table. Not subtle looks, but deliberate, meaningful eye contact that lasted just a beat too long. Harper would catch his eye and smile in this secretive way, and Taylor would nod slightly, like they were having an entire conversation the rest of us couldn't hear. Mom seemed nervous, like she suspected something was coming, but couldn't quite put her finger on what. She kept fidgeting with her napkin, asking if anyone needed more water, making small talk that felt forced and unnatural. Even Aunt Ruth, who usually dominated every family gathering with stories about her neighbors, was quieter than usual. I went through the motions of enjoying my birthday dinner, but I felt like I was watching everything from outside my own body. The food tasted like cardboard. The conversation felt scripted. Every laugh seemed too loud, every pause too long. When it came time for cake, I stood up to cut it, trying to focus on making even slices and serving everyone properly. All I could focus on was the weird energy radiating from Harper and Taylor. I was halfway through cutting the second slice when Harper stood up and cleared her throat. The sound cut through the dinner conversation like a knife, and suddenly everyone went silent. She had this triumphant look on her face, like she was about to deliver the most wonderful news in the world. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice carrying this fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. Her hand moved to her stomach in a gesture so deliberate, so theatrical, that there was no mistaking what she was about to say. "Taylor and I are having a baby." The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed, nobody said anything. The silence was so complete, I could hear the kitchen clock ticking from the next room. Then Mom's fork clattered to her plate, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet room. I saw Aunt Ruth's mouth fall open, her eyes darting between Harper and Taylor like she was trying to make sense of what she'd just heard. I looked at Taylor, waiting for him to jump up, to deny it, to explain that this was some kind of sick joke or misunderstanding. But he just sat there, staring at his hands, refusing to meet my eyes. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't jumping up to explain or apologize or do anything that resembled the response of an innocent man. He was just sitting there, letting Harper make this announcement at my birthday dinner, in my house, about my husband. The husband I'd supported through law school, the husband I'd been trying to have a baby with for 3 years, the husband who'd held my hand through every fertility appointment and promised we'd figure it out together. Harper was still standing, her hand still resting on her stomach, looking around the table with this satisfied smile like she'd just delivered the best news anyone had ever heard. She was glowing with triumph, practically vibrating with the joy of finally being the center of attention in the most devastating way possible. And that's when something shifted inside me. The shock gave way to this strange, cold calm. Because suddenly, everything made perfect sense. All those late nights when Taylor claimed he was working. All those times Harper had shown up at our house right after he got home. All those secretive phone calls and mysterious expenses I'd been documenting. They thought they'd planned the perfect moment to destroy my life. They thought they'd cornered me, that I'd have no choice but to sit there and take it while they announced their betrayal to my entire family. But what Harper didn't know was that she wasn't the only woman carrying Taylor's baby. I should have been devastated. I should have been screaming or crying or throwing them both out of my house. Instead, I felt this strange calm wash over me. Like I was watching this happen to someone else entirely. Like I was floating above the scene, observing these people destroy each other's lives with perfect clarity. I set down the cake server and smiled. Really smiled for the first time all evening. The kind of smile that comes from finally understanding a joke everyone else has been telling behind your back. "That's wonderful news, Harper," I said, my voice steady and clear as crystal. "Taylor, honey, should we tell everyone about your other baby too?" The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood floor. Taylor's face drained of all color, going from flushed embarrassment to ghost white in seconds. Harper's triumphant smile faltered and crumbled like a house of cards. Mom looked between us like she was watching a tennis match, her head swiveling back and forth as she tried to process what was happening. Aunt Ruth had stopped chewing entirely, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "See, what Harper doesn't know," I continued, still wearing that serene smile, "is that Taylor's been busy. Really, really busy these past few months." I paused, letting the tension build, watching Harper's confident expression dissolve into confusion and growing panic. Because 3 months ago, his ex-girlfriend Madison called to let him know she was pregnant. With his baby. The baby he's been sending money to support while telling me we couldn't afford fertility treatments. I stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen, returning with a manila folder I'd prepared that morning. Inside were copies of bank statements, text messages, photos, all the evidence I'd been gathering for weeks while they thought I was the naive, trusting wife and sister. I spread some of the documents across the dinner table like I was dealing cards. Bank transfers to Madison's account. Screenshots of text messages between Taylor and Madison discussing doctor appointments and baby preparations. Credit card receipts for prenatal vitamins and maternity clothes that had never come home to our house. "Madison's due in December," I said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. "Harper's baby would be due in, February? March? That's assuming it's actually Taylor's baby and not just a convenient story to break up my marriage." The silence stretched on like a held breath. Harper was gripping the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She looked like she might fall over. Taylor finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Olivia, I can explain." "Oh, you'll have plenty of time to explain," I interrupted, my tone still perfectly pleasant. "To your lawyer, to Madison's lawyer. To the judge when we divide up your assets to support your children. Both of them." I turned to Harper, who was staring at the evidence scattered across our dining room table, like she was seeing a ghost. Her face had gone pale, and she was swaying slightly on her feet. "Happy birthday to me, right?" I said sweetly. "Thanks for the gift, sis. You just made my divorce a whole lot easier." See, adultery makes things very simple in Ohio, especially when there's documented proof of financial infidelity too. I picked up one of the bank statements and held it up for everyone to see. Taylor's been supporting Madison for months, while telling me we couldn't afford the fertility treatments that might have actually given us the baby we both claimed to want. The irony was almost beautiful in its cruelty. But the real surprise? The thing that none of them saw coming? That's a story for another day. Because this dinner was just the beginning of how I got my revenge and my life back. You see, while Harper and Taylor thought they were playing chess, I was playing an entirely different game. They thought that night was their big reveal, their moment of triumph, where they'd finally be free to be together after months of sneaking around. What they didn't realize was that I'd been 10 steps ahead of them for weeks. The evidence I showed them at dinner? That was just the appetizer. See, when I found that receipt from Romano's 3 weeks earlier, I didn't just start documenting their affair. I started digging deeper into Taylor's life, and what I discovered made their little romance look like child's play. Madison wasn't just his ex-girlfriend having his baby. She was the tip of an iceberg that went much deeper than either Harper or Taylor realized. Because my dear husband had a pattern, and Harper wasn't nearly as special as she thought she was. That manila folder I brought to dinner? It contained evidence of 3 other women Taylor had been involved with over the past 2 years. 3 other women he'd been supporting financially while I struggled through fertility treatments, wondering why we never had enough money for the procedures that might have actually helped us conceive. But here's the part that made everything worth it. While Taylor was busy juggling his multiple relationships, and Harper was planning her grand announcement, I was quietly building something they never saw coming. Remember how I mentioned opening my own bank account? Well, I did more than just move money. I started my own consulting business, helping other women who suspected their husbands of financial infidelity. Turns out my experience as a high school English teacher made me excellent at research and documentation. By the time Harper made her announcement at my birthday dinner, I already had 3 clients and enough evidence to destroy Taylor's legal career. Because what my cheating husband didn't know was that his pattern of supporting multiple women with marital assets wasn't just morally wrong. It was illegal misappropriation of funds that could get him disbarred. The look on Harper's face when she realized she wasn't the only other woman? Priceless. The look on Taylor's face when he understood that his career was over? Even better. But the best part was yet to come. Because while they were both sitting there in shock, processing the fact that their secret relationship was built on lies within lies, I was already 3 moves ahead in a game they didn't even know they were playing. See, Harper thought she was pregnant with Taylor's baby. And maybe she was. But what she didn't know was that Taylor had gotten Madison pregnant first, and Madison had already filed a paternity suit that would freeze all of Taylor's assets until it was resolved. Which meant that even if Harper was carrying his child, she'd be fighting Madison and potentially 2 other women for support from a man who was about to lose everything he'd worked for. The real kicker? I'd been documenting everything for my divorce attorney, but I'd also been sharing information with Madison's lawyer. Because it turns out that when you help other women discover the truth about shared cheating partners, they're very grateful for your assistance. If you want to know exactly how I orchestrated the complete destruction of their lives while building my own empire, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this story gets so much more satisfying than you could ever imagine. Tell me in the comments, when someone betrays you, do you believe in forgiveness or revenge? Because what I did next redefined both concepts entirely. This dinner was just the opening move in a chess game where I held all the pieces, and they were still trying to figure out what game we were playing. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.